On November 30th, 1986, opposition leader Fenech Adami marched the Nationalist Party towards a mass meeting in Zaytoun. This was a controversial move, even considered provocative, as nationalist meetings in Labour Party fortress Zaytoun was at the time seen as taboo. The nationalist equivalent of Zaytoun is arguably Slima, with the Labour Party yet to hold a single mass meeting in this long-standing PN stronghold. Why is Malta divided along what appears to be a Labour South and a Nationalist North? Understanding how these voters became tied to the two parties and their migration patterns across the island is key to understanding these local political allegiances. In its early days, the Labour Party sought to secure stable employment for dry dock and civil service workers. It did this by strengthening ties with the British government, which was by far the largest employer on the island at the time. Meanwhile, the Nationalist Party was the voice of more self-sufficient and affluent classes of the population. Before World War II, much of the Maltese population resided in areas surrounding the two harbours either side of Valletta. The working class was mostly situated in the Grand Harbour area, next to the Cospicua dry docks. Meanwhile, on the Marsamxett side, one would have found the more affluent classes, living in posh, picturesque locations which were already popular with the British, such as Guardamangia, where none other than Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth II herself, resided. World War II brought about the first wave of migration. Richer classes, typically nationalists, could afford to move away from the perils of Axis bombardments targeting the Grand Harbour to safer, more rural locations such as Mostar and Melilla. The second migration wave was a result of the 1950s population growth. Census data shows that couples typically chose to reside in locations close to the wife's family. Furthermore, in the absence of accessible means of personal transportation, locations in the proximity to the place of work were preferable. It is of no surprise, therefore, that localities such as Paula, Vgura, Zabar, and Zaytoun were natural choices for couples who, understandably, wanted to leave behind the war-devastated Cotonera. As these couples moved out, they carried along their traditionally Labour allegiances. Unlike Cotonera, the Marsamxett area did not suffer the same level of wartime destruction. Nevertheless, newlyweds from this part of the island were also moving out to localities such as San Juan and Attart. Not only were these localities more affordable alternatives to the very costly Slima residences, but thanks to already established British settlements, they still retained some of the familiar Slima character. While these migration patterns were taking place, the two main political parties were busy forging important alliances, pushing smaller parties into oblivion. The Labour Party formed an alliance with the General Workers' Union, cementing the vote of dockyard and civil service families. It is no coincidence that during this time, we see the Labour Party pushing proposals such as integration with Britain, as part of their attempts to build stronger economic ties between the British government and Malta. Meanwhile, fearing the rise of the Anglican Church in Malta, the Catholic Church saw the already anti-British Nationalist Party as a natural political ally. This helps the PN gain new inroads with rural communities such as Sijiwi and much of Gozo. Meanwhile, poverty and destruction persisted in the Cotonera area. To address this, Labour administrations started building housing estates all over the island, giving rise to Labour Party voters migrating to localities beyond the outer harbour area, such as Ormi, which had not previously been common destinations for Cotonera residents. With families and friends being the strongest agents of political socialisation, it is no wonder that these political frontiers remain with us to this day. However, the 2013 and 2017 general elections may have shown signs of a trend in decline, with young couples now migrating to all parts of the island, and the number of floating voters on the rise.